fist fight as boys do. But when he gets there, AVION is terrified to see that Will and his friends have shown up with guns. And they leave. And you're going to hear evidence that during that day, AVION's recounting what's going on. He's recounting it. And he says, we don't need poles. We're just trying to go to work. We don't need poles. And you're going to hear testimony that poles is a street term for a firearm. It's a street term for a gun. AVION says, I went to have a fist fight. I went to have this out. I went to have this issue over Ayla Oberstar. I went to have this year's worth of beef out with my hands. And Will Sheffey shown up with guns. So I left. We don't need poles. That means we don't need guns. AVION didn't want guns to be part of this day. So he left. It's done. It's moving on. We don't need poles. Will Sheffey showed up at Rainforest Village. That doesn't mean Will Sheffey deserves to be dead. It doesn't make his death less of a tragedy. But AVION Gaines is not guilty, and the evidence is going to show he is not guilty of Will Sheffey's death. You will hear that ultimately all of these people, other than Will Sheffey and his contingent, Brett Adams, Ed Ayla Oberstar, you will hear that a lot of these people end up congregating on Shelby at the home of Leatrice Smith. Leatrice, you will hear, is my client's grandmother. You are also going to hear about Lakeisha Jackson, that is my client's aunt. You are going to hear about Roberta Gaines, that is my client's mother. You are going to hear about Zayathir Jackson, that is my client's first cousin. And you also are going to hear about Solomon Gaston, that is my client's lifelong best friend. You will hear that they met at Head Start when they were just little babies. You will also hear about Tamika Montgomery, my client's stepmother for all intents and purposes, Roberta Gaines' longtime wife or partner. You're going to hear that all of them, along with other people, are at Leatrice Smith's house. And you're going to hear that Will drives past that neighborhood. And in her opening statement, the state of Ohio, they attempted to say that was the only way he could possibly get Ayla Oberstar home. It was 6 o'clock on a summer Saturday. He didn't have to drive past that house. There were other avenues towards which they could get to Ayla Oberstar's house that didn't involve driving past Leatrice Smith's home. And these people are there. There's a lot of people there. And now Lakeisha Jackson, who's supposed to be a mom. She's supposed to be a mother to Zayathir Jackson. She's supposed to be an aunt to AVION and Aviante. She's supposed to be the grown-up in this situation. These kids are kids. Yes, they're of the official age of majority, but these are babies. Will Sheffey is a baby. AVION Gaines is a baby. They are children. Lakeisha Jackson is supposed to be the mom. She says, let's get him. Go get him. She encourages her son to pursue Will Sheffey. Lakeisha Jackson encourages her own child to pursue Will Sheffey. And she not only encourages it, she gets in her own car. So at this point, you're going to see a video. And you're going to see that Lakeisha Jackson leaves the house on Shelby. And you're going to see that she leaves it in her maroon Buick. You're also going to hear about, and you're going to hear from, Tyree Alston and Jessica Cruz. They also leave at this point. And you're going to hear that Lakeisha Jackson is charged in this homicide. You're going to hear that Tyree Alston and Jenna Cruz are not charged with a crime. You're going to hear that Zayathir Jackson gets in a car with his girlfriend, Jenna Ball. You're going to hear that she is not charged in a crime, yet they all caravan behind Will. They all caravan behind Will Sheffey. And Will Sheffey is the front car. Will Sheffey has nobody blocking him in at this point. Will Sheffey doesn't drive to the police department. Will Sheffey doesn't pick up his phone and say, hey, listen, I've been beefing with these people for years and it's gotten out of hand and now they've got 4 cars behind me. He doesn't do that. He continues to drive. And minutes later, full minutes later, Aviante Atterbury leaves the grandmother's house at Shelley. And at the same time, the vehicle belonging to AVION GAINES also leaves. You're going to hear that Solomon Gaston says that Avion's driving Avion's vehicle. You're also going to hear that you should view every bit of what Solomon has to say, or you may hear him called Solo, has to say, should be viewed with grave suspicion. The vehicle belonging to AVION also leaves at that point. But that vehicle, the Nissan, the Kia, that vehicle leaves and drives the opposite direction, as does the one belonging to Aviante. They go the complete opposite direction of everybody else. And then, ladies and gentlemen, what happens next is you're going to see the caravan behind Will. And still he doesn't call 911. Still he doesn't drive to a police department. You're going to see that caravan continue. Will Sheffey's actions are not at question in this case, but they absolutely go to the element, the issue of whether or not he was kidnapped, whether or not he was restrained of his liberty. And he's the first car in this caravan. He's the first car. He's not calling 911. He's free to do whatever he wants. He is not being restrained of his liberty. And then, you're going to see Xavier Jackson get out of Jenna Ball's car. And you're going to see him run like a lunatic past all the other cars and past his mother's car, attempting to catch Will. AVION has nothing to do with this at this point. He's physically running with his body, trying to catch a vehicle on a city street. And when he can't catch them, he then switches with his mom. He gets in the driver's seat of that maroon Buick, and she gets in the passenger seat, and they continue the pursuit. And then ultimately, what you're going to see is that these 2 cars turn left out of 2 different side streets. Nobody's in front of Will still. Will is able to go wherever he wants. He is not blocked in. These 2 cars essentially turn left out of 2 different side streets. And if you will, it's almost as though Wyllyam Sheffey's car could have T-boned that purple or that maroon Buick. However, there is ample space for that car to move. You're going to see then that Xavier Jackson exits that vehicle. And in what the state of Ohio wants you to believe is a hand signal to try and get a weapon from the vehicle owned by my client, he raises his hand. That hand I present to all of you when you watch this video, and you should watch it as many times as you need. That hand looks to me to be already armed. Aviante Atterbury's car comes and kind of parks, if you will, perpendicular to the maroon car. Will Sheffey's car still has plenty of room to leave. He is not blocked in. He could reverse and turn in either direction. I, in fact, submit to you that you're going to see that the car could have rolled or could have moved without having to reverse out of there. He is not kidnapped. Xavier Jackson's exiting the vehicle. He's got his hand with a weapon in the air. Aviante Atterbury pulls up. He gets out. He gets shot. And in the meantime, the black vehicle belonging to my client comes up and goes, again, parallel to Will Sheffey's car. Xavier Jackson walks to the window. The state of Ohio wants you to think that he takes a firearm from inside that car. There is absolutely no evidence of that, and I would submit to each and every one of you that the evidence is going to show Xavier Jackson was armed long before he went to that vehicle belonging to my client. My client's vehicle then continues along his route, turns left, and is facing the opposite direction of where this shootout is occurring. This car is going the opposite way. The shots are fired. And while deceased in the front seat of the car, Will Sheffey's car manages to roll about 100 feet. His car is able to get out. His car is able to move. Even in death, he wasn't restrained of his liberty. My client had nothing to do with this. My client was away. You will hear then testimony that sometime later, my client and Solomon Gaston, who you will hear was charged with similar counts as my client in this case, with aggravated murder, go to the home of Emma Escalante and switch cars with her and drive back to my client's father's house. You're going to hear that. You're going to also hear that Emma Escalante, despite switching cars, is being held by the state of Ohio and is uncharged in this case. You're going to hear that Solomon Gaston, despite being charged with all of these extremely serious charges, he pled down to a series of charges that limit his exposure. You're not allowed to contemplate punishment in this case as it relates to my client, AVION GAINES. But as it relates to Solomon Gaston, you are allowed to.
Hold on.
Objection.
There's an objection. Can you approach, please?
Solomon Gaston has not pled in this case. However, you will hear that he has entered a cooperation agreement with the state of Ohio. He is now a cooperating witness for the state of Ohio and hopes to enter a plea to significantly reduced charges in exchange for his testimony against my client's brother, his mother, his cousin, his aunt, my client's stepmother. Solomon Gaston is hoping for something, and you should take every word of his testimony with grave suspicion. Ladies and gentlemen, Lakeisha Jackson told her son, "Go get him." Lakeisha Jackson led a car chase of Will Sheffey. Lakeisha Jackson switched spots with her son and allowed her son to drive. Xavier Jackson ran like a lunatic after Will's car. Xavier Jackson exited Lakeisha's car when they nearly had an accident. Xavier Jackson raised his hand in what I submit to you appears to be an armed manner. Aviante Atterbury gets out of his car, gets shot himself, and returns fire. You're going to see that Brent Adams returns fire. We're going to see Jeffrey Lee is also armed. What you're not going to see is if my client had anything to do with this case. Ladies and gentlemen, I submit to you that when you look at who's charged in this case, including my client, most significantly my client, you will see that the charges reflect an intention to rid the city of Painesville of this family. could and should be charged, who is guilty. The state of Ohio wanted to do more than clean the streets of this family. They would simply have charged AVION Atterbury, Lakeisha Jackson, Zayadir Jackson, and Solomon Gaston. The remaining defendants are an attempt on the state of Ohio to rid the streets of Painesville of Roberta Gaines and her family. Ladies and gentlemen, we do not hang the son for the crimes of the father, or in this case, the horrific crimes of the aunt, of the cousin, or of the brother. And that's what they're trying to do. And that is why the evidence is going to show that my client, AVION Gaines, is not guilty. Thank you.
All right.